What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Collider Studio, presented by Saratoga Spring Water for another Sundance 2023 interview. Here's a movie I'm a big fan of, My Animal. I'm so happy to talk to you about your movie. I'm a big Midnight lineup fan in general, so my heart gets especially full when I see a movie make an impression like this one made on me. Congratulations. I have a feeling you're being asked this a lot. I don't know who wants to do this. People out there don't know what My Animal is just yet. Who wants to give a brief synopsis of the film?
Director, I would say, definitely.
I mean, I think the way I like to answer that is that it's a film for outsiders. I mean, it's a film about the horror of the outsider. And it's a film about, it's also a love story. It's a story of Heather and Johnny, a hockey player and a figure skater who meet and fall in love while coming of age. In the context of also a werewolf film.
This is a first feature for you, and that is a feat to pull that off in and of itself. What would you say is the biggest misconception about what it takes to get your first feature a green light? But then also, what's a common piece of advice you have heard that actually did help you get My Animal through to fruition?
I think the big thing is just like not asking for permission. I think it's just about going out there and finding the other people that want to make something with you. I think a lot of that is cast driven. For me, it's just like finding the like perfect creative matches, which I felt like I really found with Bobbi, I really found with Amandla, and that was the thing that set the project in motion to really get made. So that was like I think that's a big part of it, and I think you just have to find the right people for the role. So I don't know. I mean, I just think that sometimes you can get caught into this feedback loop of trying to find people like, oh, like, will you make this? Will you do this? And I think you just have to chart your own course and like believe in the project and the material and make it happen. So
I think it's a really special thing when we find the right collaborators that we want to stick with in this industry. So how did you two find each other? And then what did you see in each other that signaled to you, like, this is a person that I want to keep working with in this business?
Okay, well, I'll start just because, and then I'll have Jay continue on it. I know, it's funny. So on my end, it's really funny because when I was at Sundance with a short film a few years ago, I met a producer, Todd Brown, who's at XYZ Films, and now I'm rep there. And he knew about a project that I had, and he invited me to pitch that project in Macau, China, at a film festival there. So I pitched there, and then I met my producer, Michael Solomon, there, who had another interesting project. And so then he, we kind of kept in touch because he knew that I was Canadian as well as American and French. And so he was like, oh, well, maybe we could work on a project together. And there was one moment when he passed me, he was like, oh, I have a script. I think you might be interested. And I was like, okay, like I'll check it out. And he didn't tell me who had written it. And then when I got it, I was like, I saw Jay's name on it. And I was like, that's so crazy because I was in the music scene, music videos, things like that in New York. And I think there was like a passing moment when Jay and I maybe said hi in like a green room or something, like very briefly. And so it was really surreal to see that like Jay was also working in film. I just didn't know that aspect of her. And then I read it and I just fell in love with the world and the characters. And then we met up and decided to work together. So that's my side of it. But Jay has a totally different side too.
I mean, similar. Yeah. So I am a musician. And I went through a very hard time a couple years ago, and I wrote a script and I sent it to a very good friend of mine, Ali Reza. And I was like, hey, does this suck? And he sent it to Michael Solomon because they work together a lot. And I didn't really know, or I didn't really understand kind of like what that meant or like the consequences of it. But then Michael was like, hey, have you ever considered optioning this? And I was like, what is that? And then he's like, I'm going to attach Jack to the option. So that's kind of where it all began. We then officially met at a bar in like New York somewhere and just talked and tried to figure out if we had chemistry.
Makes me really happy that we're sitting in Park City at Sundance, and that kind of connected the dots years ago. It just like goes to show what a special place this is. Bobbi, before we loop you into the conversation, I want them to talk about you a little bit. What is something that Bobbi did in their interview, in their audition, that made you say, like, this is our Heather, and they're bringing something to the role that nobody else has, and maybe something you didn't even realize was in the role to begin with, actually?
It's so funny because when I sent the script over, we didn't do an audition. I was just like, Bobbi, Bobbi's it. And I watched a lot of Bobbi's movies. So like a lot of them all in a row. I do like lots of heavy research. And I just like, it just felt right to me. It was in the middle of the pandemic. It was just like, it was really, I think it was like May of 2020. It was like everything felt really crazy and weird. And it's not like we were going to be able to meet up or anything, even though we were both in New York. So it was just like, okay, I'll send the script and see what the response is. And it was just really immediate, like loving the content. And it just, I don't know, you do a lot of work to try to find the people that you think will be attracted to the material as well. You know, like I don't want to go out to an actor who's just like, oh, I'll just take anything. You know, you want to find those special people that like actually personally connect with the material as well. And it was really interesting too, because then I think there were other elements of, even before we approached Bobbi, when we were working through some of the screenplay, there was like a moment with like the shaved head scene. And that was almost kind of inspired by, I don't know if I ever told you that, but that was kind of inspired by you, Bobbi, because I had seen those pictures and I was like, okay, this is like, I don't know. So your story before you were even involved got like into the DNA of the script. So I'm glad that you wanted to do it.
Yeah, again.
Yes.
Bobbi, had you ever been in a situation where you were just sent a script as an offer? Did this mark a first in that respect?
This wasn't the first, but this was definitely one of the most exciting experiences of that. Yeah, I just immediately was like completely in the world. Like, you know, I don't know how fast I read that fucking script, but I was like, you know, I got through it and was just like, whoa. You know, I had gone through the world and was just immediately fell in love with the characters. The world felt so real and visceral and exciting. And, you know, there was like a little bit of social and cultural overlap with Jacqueline, like just interesting New York weirdo scene. And I was a big fan of Boy Harsher, and I just was like, it was just a yes. And I was so excited. Yeah. And then the first time we all met up in person,
Oh yeah,
was that
like
the upstate wolf sanctuary?
Yeah, the Wolf Conservation Center, which
Yeah.
is a crazy story behind too, because so like early on before we went out to you, so like I started getting really interested in this Wolf Conservation Center, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go visit it and just like study wolves and stuff. And you can adopt wolves there. It's just symbolically like you donate money so that they take care of their like food and, you know, care. And so on Jay's birthday, I was like, I'm gonna adopt a wolf under Jay's name and under the project for my animal. And so I was like, okay, which wolf? And they have this whole like roster of wolves. And I picked Diane because that's the goddess of the moon and the goddess of wild animals. And also I found out later the goddess of like tomboys. And I was like, that's super cool. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna adopt this wolf. And so I adopt Diane, and then we go out to Bobbi like, I don't know, 9 months later, and I get this little notification from the Wolf Center that's like, oh, it's your, you know, you get little updates or whatever, and it's like, oh, it's your wolf's birthday. And when I looked at it, I realized in that moment that the wolf that I had adopted had the same exact birthday as Bobbi. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, how is that even possible? And so it felt really special. So then we all met up for the first time going to the Wolf Conservation Center, like in the middle of COVID. We had to kind of like, and like,
Private appointment, and then we all howled with the wolves together. That was really a moment.
Yeah.
This all makes me so happy. I need that conservation information too. That's very much right up my alley. I love that stuff. I have so many follow-up questions. Bobbi, I don't want to leave you yet. A two-parter about I like compound questions. A two-parter about getting into Heather. When you first started looking into the role and preparing, what particular quality were you most excited to bring to screen? But then what is something you discovered about the character the more you got into it, and maybe the more you shot of the film?
I mean, there was so much in the writing to work from, which is just such a gift because that's just not always the case. And also like in conversation with Jack and Jay, like they both just had a lot of cool, exciting ideas. And I did quite a bit of like physical training for the role, and was, you know, I think my personal prep was really like about building Heather's inner world and Heather's relationship to like her body, and like the experience of having this like body that has this capacity to like be scary and change form. And I actually thought a lot about, you know, we were looking at women wrestlers, women bodybuilders, and kind of like the gender presentation of that experience. And we even, I had a trainer who they had suggested, but was already someone I knew from like performance art scene, another redhead butch, cool person, whatever. But yeah, I was thinking a lot about like the psychology of dogs within kind of like the wolf conversation and the way in which training is so important for like the mental health of dogs, and was thinking about that in terms of like Heather's relationship to like, you know, post the beginning of her realizing that, you know, she's dealing with being a werewolf, you know, when she hits puberty, working with like intense physical training to kind of like, you know, control her body and like stay connected to her body and have a relationship with this really complicated body that she's inhabiting in like a town that, you know, she's not totally accepted within. So that was sort of like my early process, and yeah, just like approaching it from a really somatic place. I like put on 10 pounds of muscle, which I feel like no one noticed, but I did, so that was cool. I was like eating like 5 meals a day at one point, like
I remember
weightlifting. It was, and then the movie got pushed back a year. No, that's, you know, that's how it goes. But the thing that was really exciting to discover on set was learning about Heather through her relationships, and you know, it was such a gift that like actually the order of things we shot, the first week we shot all of the one-on-one scenes with Amandla, the Johnny character, and that was just such a nice baseline to like build this new part of Heather, you know, this part of Heather that she's like discovering about herself through the movie. And that, you know, like that was like a kind of magic that could only happen, you know, there. And, you know, like on days off, me and Amandla would like, you know, look at the script and talk about what was coming next. And, you know, we were all just like really in it.
I have to highlight Amandla here. What is something you appreciate about Amandla as a scene partner that helped bring something out of your own character that you couldn't have reached without her, and maybe you hope to experience with more scene partners in the future?
Yeah, I mean, there were just so many gifts about working with Amandla. I mean, they're such a good friend, and like, she's just such an incredible actor. And, you know, it's such a dream to work with someone who you already have, you know, trust and comfort with, who you respect, who you know respects you. Also shooting like queer intimate scenes with someone who is also a queer person and can like relate to those experiences makes it feel so safe. But yeah, I mean, she's just a fucking really good actor, so that helps, you know, and also just really generous, you know, like we both would always like, you know, I don't know, like little nerdy things like staying for each other's coverage, even though like it, you know, I might.
There's not a nerdy thing that's really important.
Yeah, like being like, okay, my turnaround might be like a couple minutes less if I don't leave, but I'm like, this is an important scene and I want to like be there for Eyeline. Like, you know, we just did that for each other. The whole, like, we just kind of like held each other through it in a real way that I think, you know, was meaningful.
I'd believe it. I feel like you could feel like the chemistry and the electricity between the two of you leaping off the screen, and I feel like you can't achieve that unless you put all that work in behind the scenes as well. Back to the werewolf thing. I'm a big nerd for lore. I love knowing every little detail, so I am curious, have you two mapped out how this curse works? Is it only hereditary? Is it transmissible? Like, what does it do to the body? How can one control it if we experience more of Heather's life beyond this story? What specifics can you maybe share?
Well, I will say once you kind of give your story to a director, they are allowed their own history. But funny fact, when I wrote it, it was actually a family of dogs. And my understanding was it was like an outsider family, and it existed within this unit only, because they carry that trauma with them, like that monster. You know, even any form of transformation is like can be horrific. But then when we started meeting, yeah, I think one of the first things Jack said was like, I really think it should be wolves, don't you think? Like that is actually where that myth comes from. But I know Jack put in a lot of time and math on like moon cycles and that becoming an actual part of the film, where in the original draft it was kind of secondary, because again, they were dogs in the beginning. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just attracted to the wolf because of it being this very feared creature, this thing that is like kind of shunned from society. It's on the outskirts. There's a lot of interesting mythology with it. And I just was like, I don't know, I really felt this movie felt very much, it was a night movie. It takes place at night. We were doing night shoots, and I wanted to feel this sense, this heavy presence of like this moon was his own character, right? And it's like, it's completely lords over these characters, you know? And if you were in that kind of situation, you would be super aware of that. And I just love playing with that and playing with the idea of the lighting for it, or how you would have that creep into a scene, or how it would just always be present, even if it wasn't like, you know, really in your face. So I don't know. I thought there was a lot of really interesting parallels between like the wolf and like the outsider. It just felt like hand in hand to me. And there was also something more dangerous about it, which I liked. But I also like, what I really fell in love with Jay's script was that it was like subtle, and that it wasn't like, you know, when it was funny because Michael first said it was a werewolf movie. That's how he pitched it to me. And I was like, I don't know. Like, you know, when he first said it, because you have this association with werewolf movies being very like creature driven. And I wanted to do something that was more like surreal in its approach. And we like actually shot with real wolves. That's why I went to go to like the WCC and stuff, because I thought that was a lot more interesting in a way to explore that, and like explore this surreal connection of like, is it happening? Is it not? Is it just a metaphor for trauma? Is it something beyond that, you know? And like, I thought there was something kind of more interesting about that, you know, way of exploring the werewolf like myth without being too like aggressive about it on the genre side. So
given how successful you were with that, for anyone else out there who is making a werewolf movie, what would you say is one do and maybe one don't? I mean, I guess it's story specific depending on what kind of characters.
There are no rules. I'm not going to tell anybody how to make their movie.
That's the right answer.
I think that they just need to go with what's true to them and what they think is cool. Like, that's all you have to do. Just do the thing you think is cool, and that will show through. Like, that's what matters.
I love that answer. For all three of you now, a little cheesy, but I feel like we don't tell people in this industry good job nearly enough. So whether it's your actors or someone who is behind the scenes on this film, can you each name a time when someone just like absolutely crushed their work and you want to say good job to that person?
I can start. I mean, obviously these two fucking legends. And I forget if I'm supposed to not curse on this.
I feel like it's happened. You're in the clear.
Okay. But, you know, someone who's not at this table right now, Bryn McCashin, our DP, was someone who I really felt like his dedication and love and his deep respect for all of us, you know, on set. And he just rode so hard, you know, like he just was in the woods with us, in the snow, like running through the snow, like he really brought a lot of like dedication to the project in a way that I want to like really shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, definitely Bryn, and I'll do another example of somebody on the ground in Timmins, Ontario, where we shot. There is a guy there, Brian Jones, who like I really have to shout out to, because he really made like everything happen there. He was a retired accountant in his 60s, and he got really into the project. He was doing location scouts for me, like remotely with Zoom. And because it's a small town, he did everybody's taxes. So he knew everybody in town. And so he was like, oh, do you need this type of vintage car? Because I know this person and I went to school with them and their mom has this car. And it was like every step of the way, he knew everybody in town. And we needed somebody like that to be able to like really secure like cool locations, like, you know, interesting extras. Like, I mean, he helped with so much. And he was also just like, you know, we had like a COVID shutdown and he was like taking care of me. He like brought me food. He brought me like stuff from the store. He like really cared about this project in this way that like was very touching to me, because I think, I don't know, like I live in New York, and like, you know, sometimes it's just kind of like, yeah, whatever, give me this money. And you don't necessarily get somebody on the ground who really cares about the project. And this is somebody who really like actually truly cared. And I don't know if we could have made the movie there without him. So
I feel like he needs to work on more projects.
I know.
He was incredible.
He was very, yeah, I mean, he really had a good sense of it. Like he knew exactly what I wanted with like location scouting. The photos that he got me were so helpful in pre-production, because it was complicated with COVID to be doing as much on the ground as early as I would want to do it. So I had to really rely on people like there to be able to share all these like, you know, photos and stuff, because I think on a low budget you really have to like have good locations, because you know, it's just, yeah, anyways. But Brian Jones,
I'm his biggest fan.
He killed it.
It's incredible.
And it's obvious, but I would have to say Jack. Like Bobbi mentioned earlier, there was a period where the film was not going to happen, you know, and producers can do their best, but Jack literally was fighting. Like, I feel like you romanced Paramount, like being like really far away from the project. But I remember I was about to get on a flight and like go on tour, and Jack just called me, and my option was like a week away from being up, and Jack was like, "We're greenlit."
Yeah, it was pretty wild. And you know, one thing I was gonna say about the first question that was posed about like this whole process was, and meeting Jay and stuff. What I forgot to say, because it was our first question, was that I was this huge fan of Boy Harsher. So it was like super cool when I got the script, because I was like, oh man, this is crazy. Because before that, like a year previous to that, I was working on a different screenplay, and I was like, the whole time I was listening to Boy Harsher, like the whole time. And so it's like it somehow manifested into my life. Like I was like, oh, writing and listening to Boy Harsher, then the writer from Boy Harsher comes and like manifests into my life. So I was like, that was really cool too. Like just is like, I don't know. It was like immediate. I was like, of course I want to work with Jay.
The project had to happen. Yeah.
There's so many things that you guys have described that just make me believe that it was meant to be, and all the hard work that went into it really paid off, because this is something special, and it's so exciting to get to sit here and tell people about a festival movie that they're guaranteed to see in the near future. So congratulations on the movie. Congratulations on being able to get it out into the world, which is a whole nother achievement. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
To everybody
Thank you
out
so
there,
much.
keep an eye out for My Animal and for more interviews from Sundance 2023.